Now let's get to our first topic of discuss very quickly. The year 2022 was supposed to be a year of full recovery from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and its attendant woes. But the Russia-Ukraine war put a damper on the growth forecast as food inflation surged globally, leading to a surge in supply-side bottlenecks. As also the year 2023 begins, economic cheer is scarce on the ground amidst a darkening economic outlook marked by an imminent recession and persistent inflation. According to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF for the world's economy is in for a tougher year as it projects 1/3 of its globe will slide into recession as global GDP growth will decline to 2.7%, down from 3.2% in 2022, making it the slowest rate in the past 20 years, apart from the global financial crisis in 2019 and initial COVID-19 shock in 2020. Well, to give more insight into the prospects and, of course, challenges the global economy for the year 2023, I'm being joined live via Zoom by the fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Mr. Oyedele, Happy New Year to you, and thank you so much for your time on the show. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Tolu, and Happy New Year to you and your audience.
Thank you so much. Let's start with what happened earlier today. President Muhammadu Buhari put pen to paper. Of course, you know I'm going to ask that question. Finally, that document is being signed into law. Yes, 21.8 trillion naira. What do you make of this, the timeliness, and all that has surrounded this document before now?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, we all understand in the past few hours that the President has signed the appropriation bill into law. So we now have the Appropriation Act for 2023. And like you said in your introduction, the lawmakers in their wisdom decided to jack up the already heavily deficit finance budget to be for 2023 by about 1.3 trillion. And I was reading the press release by the media aide to the president saying that, again, the lawmakers have added over 700 billion in their own constituency projects, which Mr. President had said before that it needs to stop. In addition to that, they've increased a few things here and there. So unfortunately, even the original budget presented by Mr. President had a deficit finance of about 10.7 trillion. What has happened now is essentially the lawmakers have increased that deficit to about 12 trillion naira. You also need to bear in mind that also today, Mr. President signed the supplementary budget for 2022 into law as well, which means, and that's almost 1 trillion, I think 800 and something billion naira. So when you add all of that together, it gives a lot of concerns for someone like me, knowing that our debt is going to rise even further in 2023, on top of what we already have, which is high. And even more concerning is the cost of servicing that debt. As of last year, the first 6 months, the federal government spent more than 100% of its revenue to service debts. Interest rates continue to rise, debt continue to increase. It means that unless anything transformative happens to our revenue this 2023, we're going to have far more than 100% of our revenue at the federal level being used to service debts. And that's not a good way for an economy that you're trying to get to the path of development, to spend money on other more productive human capital related infrastructure and reforms in different ways that we so desperately need.
Oil benchmark was moved from $70 to $75 per barrel, and also oil production is pegged at 1.69 million barrels per day. Exchange rate 435 naira to a dollar. Do you think this is conservative enough, or is it so ambitious?
No, I think when we move these benchmark and assumptions back and forth, I just feel like it's a waste of time, right? The revenue you're going to make in 2023 has nothing to do with the benchmark. You can say the benchmark is $10 and it goes for average of $80, you make $80. If you say the benchmark is $79 and it turns out to be $30, you make $30. So when we are fixated on this benchmark and the lawmakers will then play around with it to justify the additional cost they've added to the budget size, it means that there is very little understanding for how these things play out, or people just don't care about what it means for the economy. We know that the oil production has been challenged significantly over the past few years, to the extent that at some point last year, we couldn't even do 1 million barrels per day. Some progress are now being made, but not enough. So I would imagine that, getting to 1.69, 1.7 million barrels per day, if we have the political will behind it, it's more than achievable, because our capacity is even over 2 million barrels per day. But if we don't do anything differently other than political narrative and rhetorics, then nothing will change. It will remain around $1 million barrels per day, and we will not have money flowing to the Federation account, which was one of the fundamental problems we had last year, that we had to rely solely on tax revenue in an economy where businesses are struggling, individuals are struggling, 133 million people are multidimensionally poor, unemployment is rising, some of our middle class, well-educated and skilled people are leaving the country. It's not so much more you can get from taxation in that way. So I really hope that government will put the amount where their money is and tackle these oil thefts head on, so that we can even get to 2 million barrels per day over the next few weeks or couple of months, not even end of the year.
The bigger one is the IMF warning that a third of the global economy will face recession this year. It's scary, saying United States, China, and the European Union are slowing down simultaneously, meaning their economies are slowing simultaneously. Look at what is happening in China and all of this. How worried are you with regards to what might happen to us here in Africa's most populous nation?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is where we have found ourselves. Initially, it was COVID, and then Russia added to it, just about when we thought we were recovering from COVID. The interventions that governments around the world, particularly central banks, made as a result of the COVID pandemic, we knew the results were going to start showing up in 2022, and that's when inflation started going up. As a result of that, you would naturally expect that central banks around the world will start raising rates. Now, when you start raising rates, the outcome is also predictable. Growth will slow down. And when growth is slowing down, it will mean different things for different countries. Some, because they're already in a very slow regime, they will go into recession. Those who are growing very high will then slow down. Overall, I think it's even instructive that the IMF said about a third of the world will go into recession, and that even for the two-thirds that will not go into recession, it will feel like a recession. And I do agree with that analysis and conclusion 100%, because, think about Nigeria for a moment. Our growth rate for last year was around 3%. If we are lucky, maybe we'll do another 3% or a little bit less than that in 2023. But this is a country where population growth rate is around 3%. This is a country where different people have different inflation rates, and when people are really so poor, they tend to spend majority of their money on food and maybe also energy. And you notice that the inflation on food as well as energy have risen even faster than the general price increases. So what that means is, for those 133 million households or individuals, I should say, in Nigeria, as far as they're concerned, they're already in recession. If you look at the GDP for Q3 of 2022, you have manufacturing was already in negative territories. Beverage, tobacco, and alcohol were already about minus 4%. So you just need another quarter. You may find some sectors are already in recession. You may find a lot of households and individuals are already in recession, such that at the end of the day, even countries where they're recording low growth may feel like a recession.
So really, you agree that it will be tough moving on. Are there any quick wins, because sometimes it's always difficult to ask if there is any, considering what is even happening in China and all of this. But what is the outlook considering all of these challenges, particularly for us? We are moving towards an election in a few weeks.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very difficult to find those bright spots globally when you think about the geopolitics of what Russia is doing, and it doesn't seem like there's a formula to end the invasion of Ukraine. And then you see China, with their COVID policy that seems to not be working anymore, and they're giving up, opening up the economy while the cases of COVID is rising. And you're beginning to see different countries now imposing limited restrictions to say if you're flying from China or from a third country out of China, you need to then do a few things. Before you know it, this may spread across the world. And that can also, again, restrain economic activities that's already asking for breath. So all these issues, and you're beginning to see a bit of deglobalization where some countries are beginning to look inward and even putting some quota and restrictions on what they export. So when you take all of this together and the impact of energy crisis, cost of living, it's difficult. But I'll say for Nigeria, we can find the bright spots. I was very pleased that the capital market, for example, returned about 20% last year, despite the fact that foreign portfolio investors, almost did not even show up. But you can see, local investors tried their own little best, and we had that very, compelling return. I think we rank about fourth in the world for the returns on investment. We also, have the opportunity now to attract a lot of investment, especially in gas, because Europe is looking for alternative sources of gas, and we have that in abundance in Nigeria. And I'm hoping that government will not use policies that are counterproductive, like the one proposed in the finance bill, to increase the company income tax rate for, in quotes, gas flaring companies from 30% to 50%. That can easily discourage investment. You don't overnight, after enacting the Petroleum Industry Act to give certainty to investors, you start doing something by the side that you really haven't properly analyzed. If we do the right thing and we don't make counterproductive policy decisions, I do think that Nigeria can easily write our own story. Imagine we produce 2 million barrels per day. We address fuel subsidy waste. We also close the gap on, leakages of revenue. We'll pretty much even decide the exchange rate that we want, and then we can bring down inflation in Nigeria because the bulk of it is imported inflation. I do think that, next year, is this year, not next year, 2023 will be that year of two halves. We have the first half before the handover, and we have the second half after the handover. I'm not very optimistic that a lot will change in the first half of this year. If you think about something like FS, we've been talking about it for so long, government is not doing anything differently. But I'm hoping that by the second half, we start making bold decisions and take tough but necessary decisions in the interest of this country, so that by this time next year, when we get into 2024, we can have a lot of good stories to tell.
Before I let you go, I like your thoughts with regards to the Finance Act. We know that we need revenue at this time, but we've seen a lot of knocks and, analysts commenting that this is not what we want, that this could even, deter investors from coming in, undermine their investments. What do you make of that?
I agree. I have my significant reservations about not only just the content of the finance bill, but the process. The Senate published the finance bill on the 21st of December, and they called for a public hearing the following day. Less than 24 hours. Who does that? Before people can even read, before they write their submission, before they book flight to go to Abuja if they are not currently in Abuja. The House of Reps did the same thing and said public hearing was going to be 13th of January. And then before we knew what happened, they decided to pass it as well. And they sent it to the... So I'm concerned about the process that is not being inclusive. In a democratic dispensation, you need to engage and listen to stakeholders so the outcome of your decisions are robust and in the best interest of the country. In addition to that, we have a number of provisions in the law, which I think that, the timing may be wrong, like the one on gas that I spoke to earlier on. We also have the provision about increasing tertiary education tax from 2.5 to 3%. This same education tax, where over the past 10 years, businesses have contributed more than 2 trillion naira, and nobody is asking for accountability. University lecturers were on strike for almost 8 months. The solution to the problem is not putting more burden on the private sector to contribute more money. It is to be able to ensure that the little we have contributed so far, it is utilized in an efficient manner, and we have accountability for how that money is being spent. That, without doing that, we're again going to put burden on the private sector and discourage investment. You have excise on services. We have import levy from outside Africa. Some of those things look good on paper for political rhetorics, but the reality is, if you want to import equipment and machinery, where are they manufacturing them in Africa? Won't you go outside of Africa? If you start putting levies on that, it will increase the cost of doing business. So there are 1 or 2 good provisions there, like deductibility of capital losses. If you sell your shares and you make losses, government says now you can claim a deduction. Before now, you could only get tax on the gain. You cannot claim a deduction for the loss. And for those who pay life premium for their own life and the life of their spouse or annuity, government says they can now get a tax deduction. I think that will help the insurance sector to grow overall. The finance bill is contractionary. I think it could be more robust. We can respond to the issues that are really facing us today, like the FX. I don't know why we are still asking companies to pay taxes in foreign currency, which is putting unnecessary demand and pressure on the naira. Russia, when the whole war descended on them, they said, buy my crude in local currency. In fact, recently they said, pay my taxes in local currency, and their currency appreciated. Nigeria should be able to learn something from that and create demand for naira, not demand against the naira.
I must thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much for spending your time with us on Business Nigeria. We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you for having me.